I lived in New York for a couple of years. Of course, born and raised in Montreal. I had a record that came out when I was 16 and a half years old in Montreal, Canada. It was a mild hit, and I got my first taste of success then, just right out of high school. So I figured I'm going to go big time, and at that time I moved to New York, maybe a year or two later. Dropped out of college and figured I'd pick up an education on the way. And about a year and a half in New York, and failure was imminent. Came back home and saved some money. We came out to Los Angeles. And we looked and looked and looked and knocked on all kinds of doors. And of course, it's confusing because not only is everybody telling you you suck, secretly you might think they're right, and then part of you thinks they're dead wrong, but you're dealing with hormones. You're dealing with all kinds of things that are hitting you. But the great thing that you have at 20 is you have the bliss of ignorance. You just keep going. You just see that line, you keep going straight down that line. So it came to pass that this woman said she was friends with a friend who was a friend of a cook for Frank Sinatra. That seems like a lot of friends, but in the music business, everything is about 3 or 4 degrees away. So we hopped on a bus, my brother and I, and my own personal friend from Montreal, Pasquale. And we ended up going to this club, I don't know if it's still there, but it used to be the hot spot in the early 70s or late 60s called Chili's. And we asked for Al Bonita, was his name, the cook. So out comes this big Sicilian. And my friend said, "This is Gino Vannelli, he's going to be a very big star." And Al Bonita said, "Yeah, sure, they all say that." And Al and I talked a little bit. He said, "You seem like a good kid. I'm going to give the boss a call." So we see him get on the phone. And he's saying, "Yeah, Frank, no Frank. Maybe Frank." So Al Bonita comes back to us and says, they'll meet you at, I forget the name of a hi-fi shop down the road a piece. So we get there, and before we get there, Al Bonita takes me aside and said, "Whatever you do, don't look at Chili's bad eye. He doesn't like it when people look at him with his bad eye." I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, his bad eye goes this way, and his good eye goes this way. So if you look at the bad eye," he gets really angry. So I was really, really very frightened about looking at the bad eye. So Chili finally shows up at the record shop and said, "There was a windstorm and Frank didn't want to root his Rolls Royce, so I'm here in his stead." So he said, "What you got?" And for the life of me, I was doing this. I didn't know which one was good or bad. And we finally, Chili was kind of impressed and got us to Warner Brothers 2 days later. I performed an audition for Warner Brothers, and they passed. Well, I said, what an experience. I got to see Palm Springs, and I got to meet Chili Rizzo, and God rest his soul now, I died in a bad accident. But what's more important is that a week later, we were out of money. Last $5. We were staying at this, I think it was called the Motel Orange on Sunset Boulevard. And it was the day before Christmas Eve. And my brother Joe says, "We have $5 left. One more night of hotel, we gotta go back home." It had been almost 4 or 5 months We had been in Los Angeles. And so I said, there's no way I'm going home. Well, he says, I don't know what you're going to do. You're going to panhandle, whatever you're going to do. So this was a very interesting quandary I was in. One day left. So I got up early that morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I walked down Sunset Boulevard, hardly any traffic. And like the song says, I stopped into a church. And I think it's an old Episcopalian church on Sunset Boulevard, but the doors were open, different times. And I sat down, and I love the sound of old pews because I used to be an altar boy, and I loved to hear Panis Angelicus, the choir, sing. But I sat down and kind of fell asleep for 4 hours. And I woke up kind of knowing what to do. So it was about 10 o'clock, and I rushed back to the motel, got my brother out of bed, took my guitar, and parked myself in front of A&M Records. And A&M Records was quite the label to be on in those days, with, you know, Cat Stevens and George Harrison and Carole King and the Carpenters and Sergio Mendes and so on and so forth. So I said, maybe this is it. Joe said, what the hell are you doing? I don't know what I'm doing, but I just feel something. So we were there 2-3 hours, and the guard kept coming down his guard tower and warning us not to go through those gates. I said, it's free country, I can stand right here. So just make sure you don't go through those gates. Well, then it happened. I saw Herb Alpert, the half owner of A&M Records, walk through the parking lot of A&M Records, and I said, this is it. So I dropped my guitar and I just ran through the gates. Now I knew, later I found out that he was a Vietnam vet, but the guard had a very bad limp. So I figured I did have a few moments ahead of him to reach Herb. And then as I was running, I looked back and he drew his gun. I figured, well, whatever happens. So I make it to Herb, and I grab Herb, and I say, Herb, I'm Gino Vannelli. Now it just so happens that a month before, his wife Lonnie was nearly kidnapped. They actually nabbed her, put her in a car, and she managed to work herself loose and escape. So Herb had this look on his face like, oh no, not again. So he looked at me and he said, what do you want? By that time, the guard just grabs me by the collar and starts yanking me away. And I said, give me a chance to sing for you. I just want to sing, just 2 minutes. He paused. This was the most pregnant pause I ever experienced in my life. He said, come back in 30 minutes. Of course, the guard is swearing under his breath that I got away with this caper. So I got back to A&M Records 30 minutes later, and Herb closed his eyes. And I played him a lot of songs that I recorded subsequently, and he just said, welcome to the A&M family. So I often, of course, give interviews, and people always ask me questions, for young artists starting off with what they would do, and a lot of people start off with, well, those things are impossible today. Well, let me tell you, everything that I tried in those days was impossible according to orthodox understanding of the record business. But there's always something, and there's always some way, and the way I've always found is whatever way you find to that path where nobody knows, not even you, but you have a sense, or at least you get a sense. Not exactly knowing where it's coming from, but it's coming from someplace bigger than yourself. And if you can do that, if you can reach that, if you can be in touch with that, life's pretty good. Anyways, this is...